heard about Masonic School when I was teaching at Queen Elizabeth's in Barnet, which was my first job, because we played rugby and cricket against the school. When I came for an interview, I'd been at Queen Elizabeth 6 years, and I thought it was about time I made a move. And when I came for the interview, I walked up the drive, and this, clock tower was there. There were tulips on either side on the beds, and immediately on either side of the main entrance there were 2 beds that had polyanthus in, and it looked like a Persian carpet on either side of the front entrance. And I was greeted by Mr. Vane, whom quite a lot of old boys will remember, and he took me to see Mr. Mullins. The interview went well, and obviously I got the job and I came. And I'm told, but I'm not sure whether this is accurate or not, that I was the first housemaster that was appointed directly from outside. All other housemasters had been appointed as tutors or subject teachers beforehand, and then they were promoted as housemakers. So I was a bit of a gamble, I think, to come in from outside. I was helped enormously in my first year by David Leonard, who was my tutor. He was a mathematician, and also David Astill, who was head of house. He was so mature. It was incredible, really, and the way in which he helpfully guided me through my first year. Subsequently, he went to work for Boeing in America, and later Chris Bond, who some people will know, he went into the Merchant Navy, and on his first voyage he was going through the Panama Canal and up the west coast of America to Seattle. And he'd been in touch with me and said that this is what he was going to do. And I said, well, if you're going to Seattle, you might be able to contact David Astill, which he did. And David and he went out for a meal, and they went back to David's apartment, and they put on the television, and what should come up on the television but Ston. One of the film companies had made a film there, and there it was in front of them. Then they were 6,000 miles away at that point. So that was quite an interesting event early in my career at Masonic. I remember particularly Stuart Hampson when he was head of school, because he'd been to America for a year, and we had Bill Sacco, who was in Derby House, and Bill used to come along to my geography lessons, and he was a breath of fresh air in many ways, because like most Americans, he was very keen to ask questions or make comments, whereas English students at that time were sometimes quite difficult to get going in terms of you wanted a discussion or something like that. But he was a devil at not doing work. He would not write essays like the others, but he was a great character. And I think later on he became a photographer for Life magazine. And I noticed that in the last edition of the Masonian, I think it was the president who mentioned Bill Sacco in his speech, and he mentioned how Bill had valued his year at Masonic. It really it was so different from everything that he knew in America, and he valued it greatly. Stuart Hampson was also captain of swimming, and I was in charge of swimming as well. One of the difficulties there was that our pool was 25 metres, and other pools were of different sizes when we went to other schools, and it was always quite difficult to judge, what it was going to be like when they were competing against other schools. But we had a lot of fun there with swimming, and quite a number of lads actually learnt to swim there, when they couldn't swim, which was great.
You taught me the breaststroke well.
I don't know. Oh, that's good. I remember one particular lad in the house. He built a canoe with Ken Littledyke, and he lived at Lynmouth. And his mother was, I think at that time, she was probably leader of the town council. She was certainly a councillor in the town. And when he built this canoe, he had to learn how to capsize it and recover and so on. And he did that in the bath with Ken Littledyke assisting. And everything was ready. He'd passed all his swimming tests and so on, and he was able to handle the canoe in all sorts of conditions. And it was time for his canoe to be sent home. And we got in touch with his mother, and we were arranging the bursar was arranging for transport for this canoe to go home. And then I received a letter from his mother saying that in no way was she going to allow him to have the canoe at home, because she didn't want him canoeing in the sea there, because she thought it was too dangerous. And I mean, I'd seen what it had done for this lad to build the canoe, to go through all the training and so on successfully. And so I thought, I think on this occasion it's not for me to write to his mother, I must take it to Mr. Mullins. And I remember vividly going to his study, his office, because he used to go for a walk every afternoon. I don't know whether you know this, but at about 1:30, no, it must have been perhaps a little bit later, probably just before 2:00, his rover would drive out and he would go and walk in Whippendale Woods with the dogs. And then he'd come back and he'd go to his office about 4 and stay there until 6. And I went along about 4:30, knocked on the door and went in and showed him the letter. And he said, "What do you think of this, Mr. Dilley?" And I said, "No, I think we must try to persuade her that, he ought to have the canoe." He said, "So do I." And he said, "Is my secretary still there?" She said, "Yeah." He said, "Yes." As I went and found out his secretary was there, she came in, he dictated that letter. It was absolutely brilliant. And I was over the moon. I went back to David Leonard and I said, "He's a real headmaster." He's written the most fantastic letter to this mother, because I'd been rather critical of him at times before that. Anyway, that turned out well. I was very pleased about that. And he got his canoe, and Mother was gracious enough to send a letter later on and say how pleased she was that we'd persuaded her out of her original opinion. I think the days when mothers or other guardians came at the weekend, when you had some time to go out, exeat I think we called it, didn't we, in those days, were immensely valuable, because they could then come and talk to me or to a tutor or both. and that was extremely valuable.
Yeah, we did very much look forward to a visit from a
Yes,
parent. Yeah.
that's right. And the other visits, of course, which were interesting, inverted commas, were when the girls came over from Rickmansworth, or when the boys went to Rickmansworth. There are a number of lads I had who had sisters, and they were extremely popular in the house when the sisters came over. That was interesting. Great. Vivid memories I have of beating the retreat, and being absolutely amazed at how Graham Garton managed to get them to march as they did and counter-march. And there were often youngsters there who found things difficult, perhaps in the classroom, and how he managed to get them to perform as they did was incredible. The other thing was, I remember on Armistice Day, when the band went to the memorial service in the village in the afternoon of that Sunday, and then they would come back, they would march back and form up in front of the clock tower, and they would do Sunset there, and the band would play. That was always quite a moving experience.
I played the side drum in the band.
Oh, did you? Yes.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, that was great. Colonel K, of course, was a character whom I remember. I had one occasion when he was the last person you would imagine that when our daughter was born, and he got to know about it that day, he arrived at the front door with a bouquet of flowers for my wife.
Nice.
It was really quite touching. And Bill Burgess was one I remember particularly after the end of morning service in the chapel on Sunday. If he was on the organ, then you really got something special. And another thing which he did, we used to have each term a common room dinner, and on one occasion after the dinner, I think we must have been in the music school. It was certainly where there was somewhere where there was a piano. I can't remember exactly which room it was in, and Bill just sat down at the piano and he played, and he said, "Which member of staff do you think this is?" And he sat there and played the piano, and it was amazing how in the music you could see somebody, and then he'd say, "Right, who's this one?" And then he'd play again. It was incredible. And he got this skill.
You could guess who it was each time?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
haven't heard that story before.
That
That's
was
good.
amazing. Mr. Adey was my head of department when I arrived, and he had been head of Keyser earlier on in his career, and then he gave that up, and I think that was probably when Ken Littledyke took over Keyser House, and he then Mr. Adey lived just along the avenue. There was a road which went straight on from the end of the avenue. He lived there, and sadly he became very ill, and then he died. And he said to me very early on, when I was sort of waxing a bit sort of lyrical about geography and field work and all this sort of thing, and he said, "You know, Richard, after a while, it will be the house that will be more important to you than the geography." And that was a very, very interesting comment, I think, at that time. And of course the the geography field trips were amazing, particularly from my point of view, but I've also heard since from the boys that they appreciated them as well. But what was so amazing was that I had colleagues in other schools who didn't have the opportunities that I had to do field work. I mean, my budget was way above anything that the schools in southwest Hertfordshire had, and I knew because at one stage I was involved in the certificate of secondary education, which was for people who were pupils who were not able to do O-level. It was brought in as an exam that they could do, and the schools in southwest Hertfordshire formed a consortium, and we were able to set the syllabus and the exams. And I went to Mr. Mullins and said, look, can we do this? Because we've certainly got youngsters here who come into the category where they won't be able to enter for O-level, but they would be able to get a CSE. And he said, oh yes, by all means, go ahead. He was very supportive in that way, and that was excellent. And so I knew what was going on in the schools in the surrounding area. And the head of geography at the school on Aldenham Road, he was the chair of the local consortium. And in fact, I met him last week at the Geographical Association conference again. And so that was helpful, both to the pupils and to me in terms of my professional development as well. And so we had fieldwork in Dorset, and we went to the Lake District on one occasion as well. And I had Chris Allen, who came after Mr. Adey died, and I became head of department. Then Chris Allen was appointed, and he subsequently became head of geography at Cranley School, and he and I worked together very well. He was a great guy, and he had skills that I didn't have in terms of geography, and vice versa. We complemented each other. And also we had, when Dave Collison came in the PE department, he also did some geography, and that was added to the team, which was fine. We had an inspection, an HMI inspection whilst I was there, and Ofsted could learn a thing or two from HMIs because they were with us for a whole week. So they saw the whole of the life of the boys, because they were there in the evenings as well. They didn't sort of appear just in class time, and they could see everything. And they really were critical friends. I can remember sitting down with two of them, and with Chris and Dave Collison, and we just talked about the work of the department and where we thought it might go, and so on, and that was immensely helpful. I've never seen anything or experienced anything like it, since in my career. That was not the flavour of inspections that I saw and experienced later on. What else? Oh, games, of course, played a great part. I think one of the things that I've thought about quite a lot, especially since I've retired, is the way in which senior boys brought on junior boys, and the coaching that went on, and how the senior boys seemed to absorb ideas and skills that they'd seen, and they were able to coach the youngsters, and that was great. I didn't quite get to the stage of my predecessor in headmasters, as it was, to start with, Mr. Beams, who actually did rugby training when the house matches were coming up by driving his car down towards the pavilion and shining his car lights across the field so they could practice before the rugby house matches. I didn't quite come to that, but I think one of the group of people who were perhaps not valued as much as they ought to have been were the house matrons. I was extremely fortunate in Miss Smith and also Miss Campenga, and Miss Campenga we'd been in touch with until 2 years ago, when she returned to Germany, and she was also with the house matron from Devon House, who was there at the end, towards the end. They were always great friends. She was a Spanish lady, in fact, and she then went to live with Miss Campenga in Germany for the rest of Miss Campenga's life, which was great. She had someone who was, knew her over the years and looked after her. And they did a great deal of work, looking after all the clothing and so on. They're a bit fierce sometimes, I think. But,
keeping everybody's clothes lined up.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it was quite a job. And they, some of them actually stayed in this school during the school holidays, which was, must have been quite lonely, I should think, at times. I suppose the other thing which was my particular experience was having young children in the school. Our daughter came along in 1970, and then Matthew in 1973, and they thought the grounds were absolutely magnificent. They loved it. It was like having their own sort of magnificent play area, really. And they don't remember very much about it, I don't think now, but at the time they liked it, and the boys were extremely helpful and interested in them, and they knew quite a number of them by name, and they loved to watch the band and the chord going about their activities. In fact, one of those slides that I've given you has got Arthur Andrews. One is Arthur on his own up a tree, and the other one is Tony Hudson and Arthur up a tree, doing some sort of army training. I don't know exactly what it was they were up to, but I managed to capture them on that particular occasion. Who were other housemasters? So Tony Parker at Burwood, and before him, who was before him? Okay, I can see him as plain as anything, but I can't remember his name. It'll come back to me in a moment.
Yeah, everybody does this when they're talking.
Yes. I had attached to the house, I had Gordon Metcalf, and who else? I can't remember who the others were at that point. My memory's not serving me very well at the moment. Tutors I had were David Leonard, I had Bill Lally, John Davey, who was in the music school, Alan White, who we're still in touch with.
See him.
He has become very much interested in masonry now, and he's an organist for lots of lodges. He goes round to lodges and plays the organ. I think he's even played at the main, is it called a temple? I'm not sure. in London.
The Grand Temple,
Grand
the Grand
Temple.
Lodge.
Grand Lodge, yes, in London. I think
Oh.
he's played there for them.
Mm.
So they were tutors. Jeff Childs, who there was an obituary. Well, I wrote some of it for the Masonic.
Mm.
He was a valued tutor. He had amazing insight into boys. You wouldn't have thought so but he, if you just sort of met him like that, but he knew the boys in the house very, very well. Not just the ones that were on his list, as it were, because we used to share. I think this happened in most houses. A tutor had half the
Right.
house on their list, and we had the house, but he knew them all.
Mm.
And he used to keep money in his top pocket, so that when they asked him for money from their pocket money on, when it wasn't a pocket money day, out would come some money from his top pocket.
He developed the game Stonopoly. Did you ever see that? He butchered a Monopoly board and called it Stonopoly.
That's right.
Changed all the names, changed all the cards, all the chance cards,
That's
the
right.
community test cards were all funny things to do with the school.
Yeah. With Bill Jarvis.
Yeah, Bill
The
Jarvis.
pair of them.
They did, yeah.
The pair of them together.
Yeah. I've got that in the archive
now. There was one occasion when they used to like teasing Colonel K, because if they teased him, then Colonel K would play up. He would really rise to it. There was one occasion when they, on the space between the classroom block and Warwick, where Kay was housemaster, in that asphalt area there was a huge manhole. And on one occasion, I can't remember which one it was, whether it was Bill or whether it was Jeff, they hid down there. And somehow or other they got Colonel K to come out of his house. And then one who'd been down there appeared from this manhole. I don't know whether they filmed it or not, but the effect was quite electric. Apparently, I didn't see it myself, but it was hilarious. I can remember one thing with Mr. Mullins, when I had a boy in the house, and we were over on the field on the other side of the road. We had several pitches over there, didn't we?
Yes.
And we were having it was a hockey game. That's right, it was a hockey game. And this boy got hit just under his heart. And he went down, just like that. And somebody ran for Sister Brooks, and we coped with him as best we could, and then Sister Brooks came running, and we got into they got a stretcher, we got into the infirmary and so on, and she obviously got in touch with Dr. Carreras, and he was okay, but afterwards when I spoke to Sister Brooks, she said that he was very, very frightened. And she said, "Of course, Mr. Dilley, you know why, don't you?" And I said, "Well, sister, I don't know why." And she said, "Well, his father died on a cricket pitch from being hit by a ball.
Oh. Mm.
And he was there."
Mm.
And I said, "Well, I didn't know that." And at that point, as housemasters, we did not know what the circumstances were of the parent's death. or what happened to both parents. I had one set of parents, for example, who were killed in a car crash, and I didn't know that. And it seemed to me that if you were in a position of a parent, local parentis as it were, in position of a parent, that is information that ought to be available to housemasters. They ought to be able to trust housemasters to use that information, wisely and so on. And I remember going, when we went to the dining hall for lunch, all the boys went in, and the masters used to be in that cloister just outside, and the headmaster and Bev used to come across the central path, and then we'd all go in. And the head came across on the next day after this unfortunate incident, and I said to him, I had this incident yesterday, and I'm very, very concerned that we just don't have this information. I said, if I'd known that, I could have reacted much, much better than I did. I mean, I said, I dealt with it as you'd hope you would deal with it, but I could have done it so much better if I'd known. And he said, well, I've had a battle over this for years, trying to get the Masons to agree to this information being available. But after that, what happened was every time the new boys came into the house, Sister Brooks told me the information because it was on the forms that she had. You see, and so she would say to me at the beginning of the year, or if a new boy came in, she would say, Mr. Dilley, this is the bare bones information, which I then just sort of jotted down on my index card, and that was it. But that was immense improvement, really. And the other thing was the music competitions, because Christopher Stokes, who is now organist at Manchester Cathedral, he was in charge of the house competition on one occasion, and Mary had to teach him how to conduct a choir because she knows, she plays piano and she conducted choirs and so on, so she was able to do that. I've actually got a tape, one of the reel to reel of the first house competition that we had when I was there. So that would have been in did we have it in the spring term? I think we did. So it would have been 64. And Ivan Thomas was a trumpeter at that time, and he performed. He subsequently went to the National Youth Orchestra, so he's on that. And I think Graham Garden had got quite a few recordings of various music festivals and things like that they took part in various performances. As we listened to one of them when we went up to see him on one occasion. What else have I got?
That's good that a lot of stuff has been preserved. I've had a set of tapes from Alan White that he recorded during his time, of music competitions and things like that, and I've been able to use some of that music in the video.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So I've got silent bits of the band on steady film marching around, but I've found bits of music that they would have been playing, and I've put them on top of it. So it's all come back together again now after all these years.
Yeah, that's good.
Everything's been preserved nicely.
Good.
Well, that's very good so far. I've got lots of bits to choose from there.
I mean, if there's anything in particular that you want me to talk about, I'm very happy to.
I think you've covered lots of points.
The sort of things that would be of interest to.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything else you want to say, feel free to say it. But if not, I've certainly got enough there to choose from.
Yeah, okay.
I do want us to shorten it. If there's anything else you want to say that you haven't got in, because even what doesn't go into this video now will all be saved. Everything will be there will be archived. So in future generations who want to research the masters, the Masonic school, this will all be saved.
Tom Clinton was, of course, a close colleague of mine, and it was great that he became the deputy head at the end for the last year. I think the fact that he was there helped us a great deal through that last year, which was quite difficult in many ways.
What did Tom do? Because Tom had been there for so long. How did he?
Yes, well, I mean, he'd been housemaster of Connaught for so long, and he'd been also chair of the Common Room for such a long time as well. And he was so absolutely firm and knew what was what, and got a great sense of humour anyway, so it was marvellous.
Yeah, he's in the Bushey Years Part 1. He speaks very, very well.
Yes.
Several people who don't even know him have seen that and said, "Cool, he was a good master. He was a lively person."
He was good, and he had the tuck shop as well.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
Oh, and who was the? There was the printer man.
Cornelius.
Mr. Cornelius. Yes. He was a great fellow as well. He did our wedding invitations, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. He was a very staunch Mason, wasn't he? He and
Well,
Mr. Jarman especially.
We didn't know that at the time, but I've learnt since that Mr. Cornelius was a staunch Mason, yeah.
Yeah.
That wasn't mentioned to us, was it?
No,
in the day?
no. Mr. Jarman was as well, and I remember the BBC doing a programme on Masonry, and we watched it in the staff common room, and what's he called? Jarman. What's he? I can't remember his Christian name. Harry, that's right, Harry Jarman. He was there, and he was a Mason, and he was explaining things to us, and Sister Brooks was there as well. She came. That was unusual for Sister Brooks to be invited into the staff common room. It did sort of loosen up quite a lot, I think, when by the time we had married housemasters, because when Helen was born, the common room invited us to go to the common room to wet the baby's head, which was quite nice.
Did Sister Brooks live in the school?
Yes, she lived in the infirmary.
In the infirmary?
Yeah.
I thought
she was a rattling good nurse. Very, very good indeed. I mean, she was quite fierce sometimes with the boys, but she was also very, very kind. Very kind indeed. And she did all sorts of things, on the quiet with boys that people didn't know about most of the time. She was rattling good. She used to say, it's an upper respiratory infection, Mr. Dilley. So that was one of her favourite phrases to come over the telephone if you sent a boy down, and she'd come back on the telephone, upper respiratory, Mr. Dilley. And there's Bill Burser and Mr. Gallifant, who was his assistant. I think people didn't realise, how much they did. They did for the school. And we've got a little chair. Is it right?
Yes, you walk out the shop.
Yeah, we've got a little chair here that. This was the model that they were going to have in the classrooms, And when the firm came to show them what they were like, this was what they
brought you that.
And after they'd supplied all the classrooms that they were dealing with at that point, Mr. Gallivant came to the front door with that and said, "I think Helen would like this."
Oh, that's how you got it.
So we had it.
Yeah, that's a very strong-looking one.
It's a good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been around without you for years.
So they bought them for the classrooms?
Yes. Yeah.
I see. So the big old wooden benches went before the school closed.
Stacking those. That was good. And there was who was Mrs. Steele. She used to look after the clothes and fit you for new suits and things like that, didn't she? She was a gem, that lady. She really was. And the other thing which I do want to mention, really strongly and that was I know that boys complained at times about the food, but generally speaking, I think the food was very good. And one thing which was fascinating, which people don't really know about, I don't think, is that it was very, very rare indeed to have a boy with bad, spots and things, that they have when they're teenagers, acne and things like that. It was very, very rare indeed. They were must have been very healthy from that point of view. And there's one other thing which I also noticed with amazement, really, was the fact that boys like cabbage. I mean, they would get mad with me at times if I didn't make sure that I got the food dished out quickly, so they could use the cabbage that was in the dishes and send it back for more.
I didn't eat cabbage.
You didn't do bread. I mean, it just used to go. I couldn't understand. It went so well. And there were things like that seemed to be sort of favourites, like liver and bacon. And that there were sort of crispy potatoes on the top. That they used to do, and they loved that. And if Mr. Metcalf or woodwork chap that I've mentioned, Little Dyke, he used to sit on one side and Ken the other. And if we were chattering away and we weren't, taking notice of what was going on down the table in terms of serving it out, they would get a bit fidgety and annoyed with that aspect. Of course, then there were the times when they used to take bread out of the dining room, didn't they, for the prefect's kitchen?
Toast.
And the other person that was an interesting part of life was when Yellowlees. Do you know Andrew Yellowlees?
Don't think so.
When he came into the school because he was profoundly deaf.
No, not in my time.
No, it was after your time. But he came into the house, and it was quite difficult because he was so deaf, and it meant that for him to be in with the others, he gave the appearance to them of being nosy. So if they were at a locker, for example, he would go up close to them because he wanted to hear what was going on, and that was quite difficult. It was difficult for them, it was difficult for him to come to terms with it. But he found his niche in the music school, and he became more or less Graham Garton's administrator, basically. He did so much work there, it was incredible what he did, and he loved it there as well. And Bill Jarvis, one summer, he went to Japan, and he came, because he was physics, that was his subject, and he came back with this radio equipment, which was, I suppose, CB radio they had, didn't they? CB radio? I think it must have been something like that. And he came back with it, and it wasn't, at that time, it wasn't legal in this country. You had to have a license to use it. And he came round to me and said, did I think that he could perhaps use this with Yellowlees, you see, that he would be able to hear better if he had the earphones on, and the person who was speaking used this sort of radio mic thing, you see. I said, well, we'll try it. Let's try it. And I told Mr. Mullins about it, and so this particular Sunday, Bill mic'd up Reverend Jenkins and Yellowlees, and we watched what happened. I mean, Yellowlees was on the opposite side of the chapel to me, the seat's the other side, and his face was a picture because he could hear, what was going on. And then what happened after that was, I don't know how Bill got in touch, but he got in touch with a chap who was developing this sort of equipment for deaf people. And he came to visit the school, and in my study we had Andrew there, and Bill, and this chap who was developing this equipment, and he went all through it with us, and we had a thing about this big, which was the equipment so you could charge it up, the charging equipment, and we worked through it all, and this man eventually began manufacturing this stuff. You had to have it round your neck and a sort of thing here, and Andrew had the same sort of thing, and the earphones. And I used to charge it up in the house, in our house, and he would come banging on the door because he had no idea how loud he was knocking. And, is it charged up yet? This sort of thing. Or he'd come because it wasn't working properly, and things like that. But and the school bought him this equipment, and that helped greatly, because the member of staff in class Andrew just walked round, took it round with him and gave it to a member of staff. There were teething problems, as there are with most sort of technical things, but it greatly helped him. He's been back to, certainly when the reunions were at school, he came back several times, because Mary and I went several times when it was there, and he came back then. Oh, the other person, of course, was Mr. Blake, which all old boys were. No, he was fantastic. I had a great deal of time for Jack Blake. I remember him when is it okay to mention particular boys' names?
Yeah, of course it is.
Because Patrick McGrath, he was going to Jack got him a job, and he was going to live in a sort of hostel in St John's Wood, and Mary and I took him there, when he was going to start his job there. That was quite a step for Patrick, but he's done very well for himself, I think. So,
police force?
Pardon?
Didn't he get into the police force?
No, I don't think so.
I think there's somebody else then.
No, I don't think so. I think he's now. I think I've got the right one. I think he's now got a fleet of vans doing.
I'm thinking of somebody else then.
And I think he's got a fleet of vans doing some sort of security work, I think. So that may be police element. But he did not find life easy at first at Masonic, but he came through. Yes.
John Loft was in your house.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Is he still around?
I haven't seen him since 2003 when we had the last reunion.
Oh, I see.
We both knew we were going to meet up that day.
Yes.
And we both kept walking past each other and not recognising each other. And when I looked at him, I thought, no, that can't be him.
No.
He's got big long hair,
Was it?
grey beard.
Yes.
Didn't look anything like I remembered him as a boy. He'd been in a car accident, so he was limping a bit.
Oh, I see.
And on 2 occasions that day, I looked at him, and I thought, that's not him.
Yes.
And eventually he came up to me and said, Peter, and I immediately knew it was him when I heard his voice.
Yeah.
And he says that he grew his hair long when he left school,
Yes.
like we all did,
Yeah.
but he still refuses to have it cut, even though it's modern to have it short again.
Right. I remember when we were at the junior school, you know, whilst the rebuild was going
Yes.
on,
Yeah.
and after the evening meal, the boys would sort of walk over, and I'd be having a meal in the master's dining room, and I'd drive over shortly after, and you know where you drove into the back entrance to the
Yes.
school, and then there were the toilets
On the left.
outside there. That, you know, there were the
Yeah.
nurses, the maid's house, and the matrons and so on there.
That's right.
And on this occasion, I drove in, and it was dark, and the lights were on, you know, the toilets and so on. No, the lights weren't on in the toilets. That's right. And what happened was, as I drove up, I used to park my 12-seater minibus there, and in the windows of the toilets there was flash of light, black darkness, another flash of light,
Oh, yeah.
and it was Dave Jolly striking matches to light a pipe. It was hilarious. And when I saw him about it, he said, once when you were talking about smoking, you did say that smoking a pipe wasn't quite so bad as smoking cigarettes.
Was he all by himself then?
Yeah.
I see.
Oh dear. I saw him at one of the reunions, and I saw him not last summer, but the summer before. So 2014, because he came to. Mary and I went to stay with Bob Booker and his wife in Alton, and he invited Dave Jolly to come over and have a meal with us. So that was great, and reminded him of it. But I'd seen him prior to that. I'd seen him at I think it was probably the last time we had it at school, and he called in with his daughter because he was on his way taking his daughter back to university. So he wasn't able to stay for the whole event, but he just called in, and we met him then. And we met Mike Frogbrook then as well, because sadly Mike died, because he and Bob Booker were great friends, and they lived down in Hampshire. Michael lived down in Hampshire as well. And you remember the change when the junior school closed, and then we started having the boys at 11. And one of the first ones that we had was Peter Suttill, and he came from the northeast. I can't remember whether it was Middlesbrough or Sunderland or somewhere, but it's certainly in the northeast. And he'd travelled down on his own, this 11-year-old, and he appeared at our front door because he didn't know, how to come round to the boys' entrance. And he rang the doorbell, Mary and I went to the door. We went together to the door so that we could sort of welcome whoever it was. And we opened the door and he said, "I'm Dill." Lovely northeast sort of accent. So he said, "Well, we want to know what your other name is." He said, "Oh, I'm Peter." So we said, "Right, Peter, it will be your name, not Dill." And his sister was married to a pilot, and Peter, having lost his father, his sister's husband was his substitute in a way, and he worshipped him, and Peter wanted to be a pilot as well, and he went through. He applied and he was called up for, to do exams and tests and all the rest of it, and he got through the first lot, and then he went again, and I can't remember whether he had to go a third time or whether it was after the second time, but I happened to be in the what was originally our changing room in the house and became our quiet room afterwards. I imagine you did the same in Devon. And those windows looked out on the front. And I saw this figure come through the main gate, and a more dejected figure you couldn't imagine, because they turned him down because he was colourblind. Not as not as you would have picked it up by just perhaps going to an ordinary optician, but by the detailed tests that they have to do if you want to be a pilot. And he'd failed. And poor lad, I mean, he really was, absolutely down there. And it showed in the way, the way in which he walked in. It was sad.
Yeah, you can see by the look on his face what to expect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, okay, I think that's lovely.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll stop now, shall we?
Yeah, okay.